Everyone tells you that healing feels like relief, like a weight lifting, like waking up one morning and finally breathing easier after years of holding your breath. So when it actually starts happening, most people don't recognize it, because it feels like the opposite. It feels like falling apart. It feels like getting worse. And that confusion, that certainty that something has gone terribly wrong, is one of the cruelest tricks the mind plays on a person who is finally, genuinely getting better. Carl Jung understood this paradox better than almost anyone. He spent his life watching people arrive at his door convinced they were breaking down, when what was actually happening underneath was a kind of repair so deep and so unfamiliar that their nervous system read it as danger. He noticed that real healing rarely announces itself with peace. More often it shows up as disturbance, as disorientation, as a strange ache in places you thought had gone quiet years ago. Think about what happens when a limb falls asleep. You sit on your leg too long, the blood stops flowing, and eventually you feel nothing at all. It's numb. It's comfortable in a dull sort of way. And then you stand up, and the feeling starts coming back, and it burns. Pins and needles. That prickling, stinging flood of sensation that makes you wince and shake it out. The pain isn't the injury. The pain is the recovery. The nerves are waking up. That is almost exactly what psychological healing feels like from the inside, and Jung spent decades trying to help people understand that the sting is the good news. So, today I'm going to walk you through 5 signs that you're actually healing. 5 experiences that feel so much like getting worse that most people mistake them for a relapse, a breakdown, or proof that they're broken beyond repair. Jung recognized every one of these as evidence of the opposite. And if you're going through any of them right now, there's a good chance you're not losing your grip. You're getting your feeling back. The first sign is that you start feeling more, not less, and it's overwhelming. For years, maybe your whole life, you operated at a certain emotional distance from yourself. You handled things. You stayed functional. Difficult moments came and went, and you managed them without falling apart, and you probably thought of that as strength. Then something shifts, and suddenly you're crying at things that shouldn't make you cry. A song, a stranger's kindness, a memory that surfaces out of nowhere while you're doing the dishes. You feel raw all the time, like the volume on every emotion has been turned up past what you can handle, and you find yourself wondering what happened to the person who used to have it together. Jung would tell you that person never had it together. That person was numb. What you experienced as composure was often a kind of anesthesia, a protective flattening that let you survive things that would otherwise have overwhelmed you. When you were a child, or in a relationship, or in a season of life where feeling the full weight of your experience would have broken you, some part of your psyche mercifully turned the sensation down. It kept you alive, but it also kept you asleep. And now the anesthesia is wearing off. That's what the flood of feeling actually is. The nerves are waking up, and the first thing they deliver isn't joy, it's everything you postponed. Every emotion you didn't have the safety to feel at the time it happened is arriving now, all at once, because now you finally can. Your system waited until it judged you strong enough to handle what it protected you from. The overwhelm is a vote of confidence you didn't ask for. People in this stage often rush to shut it back down. They think the sensitivity is the problem, so they try to get back to the numbness they used to call strength. Jung watched this happen and considered it one of the great tragedies of the healing process. Someone standing at the very threshold of coming back to life and reaching for the switch to turn themselves off again. The feeling is not a malfunction. It's your capacity for aliveness returning after a long dormancy. And yes, at first, it hurts like a limb waking up. The second sign is that anger you never knew you had starts rising to the surface. This one frightens people more than almost anything, because it seems to contradict the whole idea of getting better. You imagined healing would make you softer, more forgiving, more at peace. Instead, you find yourself furious, angry at people you'd made excuses for your entire life, angry at your parents, your ex, your younger self, situations you thought you'd made peace with a decade ago. And the anger doesn't feel noble or righteous. It feels ugly and disproportionate, and it embarrasses you, which makes you push it back down and feel guilty for having it at all. Jung saw anger like this as one of the most reliable signs that something buried was finally being reclaimed. He understood that a great deal of what we call being agreeable, being easygoing, being the bigger person, is actually anger that was never allowed to exist. If you grew up in an environment where your anger was dangerous, where expressing it meant punishment, withdrawal, or a parent's collapse, you learned to disown it. You filed it away in the part of yourself Jung called the shadow, the place where we store everything we've decided is unacceptable about who we are. But disowned anger doesn't disappear. It waits. And it takes a certain amount of internal safety before it dares to come up, which is precisely why it surfaces during healing rather than during the crisis itself. When you were in the middle of the thing that hurt you, feeling the anger wasn't safe. Now, finally, some part of you senses that it is, that you have enough ground under your feet to feel what you couldn't feel then without being destroyed by it. Here's the part almost nobody explains. That anger isn't there to be acted on. It's there to be acknowledged. Jung recognized that the goal isn't to unleash it on everyone who wronged you or to live inside the rage forever. The goal is to let it exist long enough to hear what it's telling you, that something mattered, that a line was crossed, that a part of you that deserved protection didn't get it. The anger is carrying information about your own worth that you were never permitted to register. When you finally let it speak, it tends to soften into something quieter on its own. But it will not skip the step of being felt. And a person who finds themselves suddenly uncomfortably angry is very often a person whose sense of self is coming back online. The third sign is that you start disappointing people, and you can't seem to stop. You notice it in small ways at first. You don't answer the phone right away. You say no to something you would have automatically said yes to a year ago. You leave a conversation without smoothing over the tension, without making sure everyone's okay, without performing the little reassurances you used to hand out on reflex. And people notice. They tell you you've changed. They say it like an accusation. Some of them get hurt, some get cold, some get quietly, persistently disappointed in you. And every part of you that spent a lifetime managing other people's feelings screams that you're doing something wrong. Jung would look at that guilt and ask a simple question. Whose comfort was your old behavior actually protecting? Because a lot of what we call being a good person is really just a finely tuned machine for keeping other people from being upset with us. If you were shaped by an environment where love was conditional, where you had to earn it by being useful, by being easy, by never being a burden, then you didn't develop generosity so much as a survival strategy dressed up as kindness. You learned that your job was to keep everyone else regulated, and you did it so well that you forgot it was a job at all. When you start healing, that machine begins to break down. And from the outside, that looks like you becoming selfish, difficult, less caring. From the inside, it feels like guilt, because guilt is the alarm that goes off whenever you stop performing a role you were trained to perform. But Jung understood something crucial here. The relationships that were built entirely on your compliance were never actually about you. They were about what you provided. When you stopped providing it, the ones that destabilize were resting on your self-erasure the whole time. This is where it genuinely hurts because some of those relationships matter to you. Watching someone you love react to your honesty with confusion or withdrawal is a specific kind of pain. But the disappointment you're causing is the byproduct of you finally taking up the space you were told you weren't allowed to occupy. The people who can adjust to the real you were never in danger, and the guilt you feel isn't a sign you've become a worse person. It's the growing pain of becoming a whole one. Before we go further, I want to mention something for those of you recognizing yourself in this. Feeling the ground shift under everything you thought you knew about who you are. We put together a guide called True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work, built for exactly this stretch of the road, when the old self is loosening its grip and the new one hasn't quite arrived. It's not there to rush you through the discomfort. It's there to help you stay steady while the feeling comes back. The link is right below if that's something you need right now. And now let's keep going, because the next two signs are the ones people misread most of all. The fourth sign is that things that used to matter to you suddenly go flat. This one is disorienting in a way that's hard to describe to anyone who hasn't lived it. The goals that drove you for years lose their pull. The hobbies, the ambitions, the version of success you'd been chasing, they start to feel strangely empty, like props on a stage after the play has ended. You keep going through the motions because you don't know what else to do, but the emotional charge is gone. And because our culture treats loss of motivation as a symptom of depression, you assume that's what this is. You assume something has gone wrong with you. Jung saw this differently, and it's one of his most useful observations for a moment like this. He noticed that the psyche withdraws its energy from structures that have served their purpose, the way sap retreats from branches in autumn. The branch isn't dying. The tree is redirecting its life force somewhere deeper, somewhere you can't see yet. When the things that used to define you start to feel hollow, it's often because they were built by a version of you that you're outgrowing. The goals belong to the person you were becoming to survive, not the person you actually are underneath. Much of what we pursue in the first part of our lives isn't chosen freely. It's inherited, absorbed from parents, from culture, from the need to prove something to people who may not even be paying attention anymore. You built a life around a definition of success that was handed to you before you were old enough to question it, and for a long time chasing it gave you a sense of direction. Then healing begins, and the borrowed motivation runs out of fuel, because you're no longer running from whatever you were running from. And when the fear that drove you quiets down, the goals it was powering quiet down with it. The flatness is the gap between an old motivation dying and a genuine one being born. Jung considered this one of the most important and least tolerable phases of the whole process, because the psyche needs you to sit in the emptiness without immediately filling it. Most people can't bear it. They grab the first new goal, the first new identity, the first distraction that promises to make the hollow feelings stop. But if you can stand to stay in that flat, empty space a little longer than is comfortable, something real tends to emerge from it. A desire that's actually yours, not one you absorbed to earn your place. The boredom isn't the absence of a life, it's the clearing where a truer one can finally grow. The fifth sign is that you feel more alone, even when you're surrounded by people. You'd think that healing would make connection easier. Instead, a lot of people find that it makes them lonelier than they've ever been. You sit in rooms full of people you've known for years and feel like you're watching them through glass. Conversations that used to feel normal now feel like performances you no longer know the lines for. You can't quite engage the way you used to, and you can't fully explain why, and the isolation of it can be crushing, because it comes precisely at the moment you expected to feel more connected, not less. Jung understood this loneliness as an almost unavoidable stage of becoming an individual. As you change on the inside, you stop fitting the shape you used to occupy in your relationships. The version of you that everyone knew, the agreeable one, the funny one, the one who kept the peace, the one who never needed anything, that version was the point of contact for a lot of your connections. And as it dissolves, you can feel the connections straining because they were calibrated to a self you're no longer performing. You're too changed for the old world, and the new relationships that will fit who you're becoming haven't formed yet. You're standing in the space between, and that space is quiet in a way that aches. There's a particular grief in realizing that some of the people around you were connected to what you did for them rather than who you are. It's a lonely recognition, and Jung didn't pretend otherwise. But he also insisted on something that reframes the whole experience, that only a person who has become a genuine individual is capable of genuine connection. The closeness you had before, the closeness built on you disappearing into everyone else's needs, wasn't the real thing. It was proximity without presence. You can't be truly met by another person while you're still hiding behind a role. And the loneliness you feel now is partly the sensation of stepping out from behind that role and discovering the world hasn't caught up to the real you yet. Jung knew this stretch of solitude intimately. During his own most intense period of inner reckoning, he withdrew from much of his professional world and spent years feeling profoundly misunderstood, dismissed by colleagues who saw only breakdown where he was doing the deepest work of his life. He later called that isolated period the most important of his existence, because the solitude forced him to find something inside himself that he could never have found in a crowd. The aloneness you feel while healing isn't a punishment or a sentence. It's the necessary quiet in which you finally get to meet yourself without an audience. So look at what these 5 signs actually have in common. Feeling too much, anger you can't explain, disappointing the people around you, losing interest in the life you built, and a loneliness that arrives right when you expected connection. Every single one of them feels like decline. Every single one gets mistaken for depression, for regression, for proof that you're broken. And every single one is the pins and needles of a life coming back into feeling after a long numbness. Uncomfortable precisely because the sensation is returning. This is the thing almost nobody prepares you for. The reason healing feels like getting worse is that healing requires you to feel what you spent years not feeling, to reclaim what you spent years disowning, and to become someone the old version of your life wasn't built to hold. The discomfort isn't evidence that you've taken a wrong turn. It's evidence that the anesthesia is wearing off, and the parts of you that went quiet to survive are waking back up, one stinging nerve at a time. Jung never promised that this process was gentle. He was too honest for that. He knew it was disorienting and lonely, and that the temptation to numb yourself back down would be enormous, because numbness at least is familiar. But he staked his life's work on a single conviction, that a person who can tolerate the discomfort of feeling again, of being disliked, of not knowing who they are for a while, comes out the other side more alive than they've ever been. The lows go lower, yes, but the whole range opens up, and the joy on the far end of it is more real than anything the numbness ever allowed. So if you're in this right now, raw, angry, disappointing people, bored with your own life, and lonelier than you've ever been, I want you to consider the possibility that nothing has gone wrong, that the very things making you think you're breaking down are the quiet, unglamorous signs that you're finally putting yourself back together in a way that's actually yours. The feeling is coming back. It's supposed to sting. Shake it out and let it. If any of this landed close to home, our guide True Self-Discovery was made for exactly this stretch of the road. 24 reflection exercises drawn from Jung's work, designed to help you make sense of the feeling as it returns instead of reaching for the switch to turn it off again. It won't rush you. It'll just walk beside you while the numbness lifts. You'll find it linked right below.